Maya Chen held tight to her mother's arm as they walked up the marble steps of Steinway Hall. The famous concert hall in New York City looked huge and scary to Maya. She could not see it, but she could feel how big it was. The sounds of their footsteps echoed off the high walls. The smell of old wood and piano polish filled the air. "We're almost there, sweetheart," her mother Sarah whispered. Maya's guide dog Luna walked beside them. The golden retriever's tail wagged softly as she led Maya forward. Luna had been Maya's best friend for 3 years now. The dog knew exactly how to help Maya get around safely. Maya was 16 years old and had never seen anything in her whole life. She was born with a condition that made her blind from birth. But Maya had something special that most people did not have. She could play the piano better than anyone her age. Some people said she played better than most adults, too. Today was the biggest day of Maya's life. She was going to compete in the annual classical music showcase for young talents. Only the best young piano players from all over America were invited to play here. Maya had worked very hard to get this chance. She practiced piano for 6 to 8 hours every single day. Even when her fingers hurt and her back was sore from sitting so long, she kept playing. The showcase was very important. The winner would get a full scholarship to study music at any college they wanted. Maya dreamed of going to Juilliard, the most famous music school in the world. But getting there cost more money than her family had. Her father worked at a small auto repair shop, and her mother cleaned houses to make extra money. This competition was Maya's only chance to make her dream come true. As they entered the main hall, Maya heard dozens of voices talking at once. Young people were warming up on practice pianos in different rooms. She could hear scales and pieces of famous songs mixing together. Some players sounded nervous. Others sounded very confident. Maya tried to stay calm, but her heart was beating fast. "There's a registration table over there," Sarah said, guiding Maya toward the sound of shuffling papers. Maya wore her best dress, a simple navy blue one that her grandmother had made for her birthday. She had picked it because the fabric felt smooth and comfortable. Maya did not care about fancy clothes like some of the other girls did. She only cared about playing music. A friendly woman at the registration table gave Maya her contestant number. "You're number 17?" the woman said with a warm smile. "Good luck today, dear. I've heard wonderful things about your playing." Maya smiled back and thanked her. It felt good to hear encouraging words. She needed all the confidence she could. Luna led Maya and her mother to some chairs in the waiting area. As they sat down, Maya could hear other families talking around them. Many of the conversations were about expensive piano teachers and private music schools. Some parents bragged about how much money they spent on their children's musical education. "Jennifer has been studying with the former student of Vladimir Horowitz," one mother said proudly. "It cost us $50,000 just this year, but it's worth it for her future." Another father was talking about his son. "We flew him to Vienna last summer to study with the best piano teachers in Europe. These other kids don't stand a chance against that kind of training." Maya felt small listening to these conversations. She had never had expensive teachers or traveled to fancy schools. She learned to play piano by listening to recordings and practicing on an old piano her parents bought at a garage sale. Her only teacher was Mrs. Rodriguez, an elderly woman who lived down the street. Mrs. Rodriguez had taught Maya for free because she believed in her talent. But Maya tried not to let these thoughts make her sad. She knew that music was not about how much money you spent. It was about how much you felt and how much you practiced. Maya had been playing piano since she was 4 years old. She learned her first song by listening to her mother's old CD of Chopin. Within a week, Maya could play the whole piece perfectly, just from memory. The hall was getting more crowded as more contestants arrived. Maya heard the sound of expensive shoes clicking on the marble floor. She smelled fancy perfumes and heard the rustle of silk dresses. Many of the other young musicians looked like they belonged at a fashion show instead of a music competition. Contestant: "Number 8 just arrived," someone whispered excitedly. "That's the girl who won the international competition in London last year. Her dress probably costs more than most people's cars." Maya touched her simple dress and tried not to feel out of place. She reminded herself why she was here. It was not about dresses or expensive teachers. It was about music and sharing her gift with the world. Luna sensed that Maya was feeling nervous. The smart dog rested her head on Maya's lap and made a soft, comforting sound. Maya scratched behind Luna's ears and felt better immediately. Luna always knew exactly what Maya needed. "Would you like to walk around and get familiar with the space?" Sarah asked her daughter. Maya nodded. It always helped her to learn the layout of new places. Luna stood up and began guiding Maya around the hall. As they walked, Maya used her hands to feel the walls and furniture. She counted steps between doorways and memorized where everything was located. The hall had beautiful wood paneling that felt smooth under her fingers. There were large windows that let in warm sunlight, though Maya could only feel the heat on her face. Maya found the main stage where she would perform later. Luna led her up the steps to the piano. It was a huge concert grand piano, much bigger than the old upright piano Maya practiced on at home. She ran her fingers gently over the keys without pressing them down. The piano felt perfect. It was well tuned and the keys moved smoothly under her touch. "This is a beautiful instrument," Maya whispered to herself. She could hardly wait to play music on it. Other contestants were looking at Maya with curious expressions. Some seemed confused about why a blind girl was at such an important competition. Others looked at her with kindness and respect. A few young musicians came over to introduce themselves and wish her good luck. "I'm Marcus," said a boy about Maya's. "Hey, I heard you play at the regional competition last month. You were amazing." Maya blushed and thanked him. It was nice to meet someone who was friendly and supportive. As the morning went on, Maya began to feel more comfortable in the hall. She had mapped out the entire space in her mind. She knew where the bathrooms were, where the practice rooms were located, and how many steps it took to get from her seat to the stage. The competition would begin in 2 hours. Maya found a quiet practice room and spent time warming up her fingers. She played scales and exercises to make sure her hands were ready. Then she ran through the piece she had chosen to perform. It was a challenging song by Rachmaninoff, one of the most difficult composers to play well. Maya had chosen this piece carefully. It was technically very hard, but it was also full of deep emotion. Maya understood the sadness and hope in the music. She had felt both of those things many times in her own life. When she played this piece, she was not just pressing keys on a piano. She was telling a story about overcoming challenges and finding beauty in difficult times. As Maya finished practicing, she heard an announcement over the loudspeaker. The guest judge had arrived. His name was Dr. Viktor Petrov, a world-famous pianist from Russia. Maya had heard recordings of his performances, and she knew he was incredibly talented. She also knew he had a reputation for being very strict and sometimes mean to young musicians. Maya took a deep breath and prepared herself for what was coming next. Dr. Viktor Petrov walked into Steinway Hall like he owned the place. The famous Russian pianist was tall and thin, with gray hair slicked back perfectly. He wore an expensive black suit and shiny leather shoes that made loud clicking sounds on the marble floor. Everyone in the hall stopped talking when they saw him enter. Maya heard the sudden silence and knew something important was happening. Luna lifted her head and looked toward the entrance. Maya could sense the tension in the room, even though she could not see what was causing it. "That's Dr. Petrov," someone whispered nearby. "He's the most famous classical pianist in the world, right now." Maya had listened to many of Dr. Petrov's recordings. His playing was technically perfect, but it always sounded cold to her. He played the notes exactly right, but Maya felt like something was missing. There was no warmth or heart in his music. Still, she respected his skill and knowledge. Dr. Petrov shook hands with the competition organizers and spoke in a thick Russian accent. His voice was deep and commanding. Even from across the room, Maya could tell he was used to being the most important person wherever he went. "Welcome, Dr. Petrov," said the competition director. "We are honored to have you as our guest judge today. These young musicians are very excited to perform for you." Dr. Petrov looked around the room with cold eyes. He studied each contestant, like he was already deciding who was good enough and who was not. His gaze was harsh and judgmental. Many of the young musicians suddenly looked nervous and scared. "I hope the level of playing today will be acceptable," Dr. Petrov said in his stern voice. "I have very high standards. I do not waste my time listening to amateur performances." The competition director smiled nervously and began introducing Dr. Petrov to some of the contestants and their families. Maya stayed in her seat with Luna beside her, trying to remain calm. She did not want to draw attention to herself yet, but Dr. Petrov's sharp eyes soon landed on Maya. He stared at her for a long moment, taking in her simple dress, her guide dog, and the way she sat with her hands folded quietly in her lap. His eyebrows raised with obvious disapproval. Maya could not see his expression, but she felt his stare. It was like a cold wind that made her shiver. Luna sensed the negative energy too and moved closer to Maya's legs. Dr. Petrov walked slowly across the room toward Maya. Each step seemed louder than the last. Other people in the hall noticed where he was going and began to watch. Maya heard conversations stop as people turned to see what would happen. When Dr. Petrov reached Maya's seat, he stood directly in front of her. Maya could smell his expensive cologne and hear his breathing. She tilted her head up toward his voice, trying to be polite and respectful. "Excuse me, young lady," Dr. Petrov said in his thick accent. His voice was not friendly. "I believe there has been some mistake here. This is a serious musical competition, not a charity event for disabled children." The words hit Maya like a slap across the face. She felt her cheeks turn red with embarrassment. Around the room, people gasped quietly. Some parents covered their mouths in shock. The other contestants stared with wide eyes. Maya's mother, Sarah, quickly stood up from her chair. Her face was angry and she was ready to defend her daughter. But Maya reached out and gently touched her mother's arm. She did not want her mother to fight this battle for her. Maya had learned long ago that she had to stand up for herself. "There is no mistake, sir," Maya said quietly but firmly. "I am contestant number 17. I earned my place here just like everyone else." Dr. Petrov let out a cold laugh that echoed through the hall. "My dear child, playing piano requires much more than simply pressing keys on an instrument. It demands a visual connection with the music, with the audience, with the very soul of each composition." Maya felt her heart beating faster, but she kept her voice steady. "I understand that, sir." "Do you?" Dr. Petrov asked with sarcasm dripping from his voice. "Tell me, how can you possibly understand the passionate intensity of Rachmaninoff when you have never seen a sunset? How can you feel the delicate emotional nuances of Chopin when you have never watched leaves falling in autumn? How can you connect with the joy of Mozart when you have never seen a child smile?" The questions were meant to hurt, and they did. Maya felt tears starting to form in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She had heard these kinds of comments before, but never from someone so famous and respected. "Music is not about what you see, sir," Maya replied softly. "It is about what you feel inside your heart." Dr. Petrov shook his head dismissively. "Feeling? My child, classical piano is a visual art as much as it is an auditory one. The great masters like Beethoven and Bach painted pictures with their compositions. They wrote music inspired by the beauty they saw in the world around them." He paused and looked down at Maya with pity in his eyes. When Debussy wrote Clair de Lune, he was describing the way moonlight looks on water. When Vivaldi composed The Four Seasons, he was capturing the colors and sights of nature changing throughout the year. How can you interpret these masterpieces when you have never experienced the visual beauty that inspired them? Maya felt smaller and smaller with each word. Other contestants and their families were listening to every harsh comment. Some people looked uncomfortable, but no one spoke up to defend her. Maya was alone in facing this cruel attack. The greatest pianists in history have all shared one important quality, Dr. Petrov continued. They could see the music in their minds and translate that vision to their fingers. They understood that piano performance is theater. The audience watches the pianist's expression, their posture, their connection with the instrument. It is a complete visual and auditory experience. Maya tried to think of a response, but Dr. Petrov was not finished with his harsh lecture. Furthermore, he said, professional piano requires years of studying sheet music. How do you read the complex notations that tell us about dynamics, tempo changes, and emotional interpretation? How do you study the composer's original markings and instructions? Maya wanted to explain that she had learned to read Braille music, notation, but Dr. Petrov did not give her a chance to speak. I have been playing piano professionally for 40 years, he announced to the room. I have performed in the greatest concert halls around the world. I have studied with masters who learned directly from the composers themselves. In all my experience, I have never seen a successful classical pianist who could not see. The words stung deeply. Maya felt like everyone in the room was staring at her and agreeing with Dr. Petrov's cruel assessment. She wished she could disappear or run away from this humiliating situation. Perhaps you should consider a different hobby, Dr. Petrov suggested, with false kindness in his voice. Something more suitable for someone with your limitations. I hear that singing can be quite fulfilling for people in your condition. Maya bit her lip to keep from crying. The word limitations hurt more than all the other comments combined. Her whole life, people had told her what she could not do because she was blind. She could not drive a car, could not see movies, could not read regular books, could not play sports, and now this famous musician was telling her she could not play piano either. Luna sensed Maya's distress and nuzzled her hand gently. The dog's warm touch reminded Maya that she was not completely alone. Her mother was still standing beside her, anger radiating from her body like heat. "Sir, with all due respect," Sarah said through gritted teeth, "my daughter has as much right to be here as any other contestant. She has worked harder than most of these children to develop her musical abilities." Dr. Petrov barely glanced at Sarah. "Madam, I understand that you love your daughter and want to support her dreams. But sometimes the kindest thing we can do is help people accept reality. Classical piano at this level requires abilities that your daughter simply does not possess." Maya finally found her voice again. "Dr. Petrov, I have been playing piano for 12 years. I practice every day for hours. I have won regional competitions and performed in concerts. I know I belong here." Winning small local competitions is very different from performing at a professional level, Dr. Petrov replied dismissively. "Those judges were probably being charitable because of your disability. Real classical music critics and audiences expect perfection, not inspirational stories." The comment about charitable judges felt like a knife in Maya's heart. She had always wondered if people praised her playing because they felt sorry for her, rather than because she was truly talented. Dr. Petrov's words brought all those fears rushing back. Maya stood up from her chair with as much dignity as she could manage. Luna immediately moved to her side, ready to guide her wherever she needed to go. "I understand your concerns, Dr. Petrov," Maya said quietly. "But I would like the chance to show you that music comes from the heart, not from the eyes." Dr. Petrov sighed heavily, like he was dealing with a stubborn child. "Very well, you may perform if you insist. But do not expect me to lower my standards or offer false encouragement. I will judge your playing with the same harsh criteria I use for everyone else." Maya nodded politely. "That is all I ask for, sir. A fair chance to prove myself." As Dr. Petrov walked away, Maya sank back into her chair. Her whole body was shaking from the confrontation. Her mother sat down beside her and took her hand. After the horrible confrontation with Dr. Petrov, Maya sat quietly in her chair, trying to calm her racing heart. Luna pressed close against her legs, sensing her distress. Maya's mother, Sarah, held her hand tightly, both of them still shocked by the famous pianist's cruel words. Around them, other contestants and families whispered about what had just happened. Some people seemed upset by Dr. Petrov's behavior, while others nodded in agreement with his harsh comments. Maya could hear fragments of conversations floating through the air. "I can't believe he said those things to that poor girl," one mother whispered. "Well, he does have a point," another parent replied quietly. "This is a very serious competition. Maybe she would be happier in a different type of contest." Maya tried not to listen to these comments, but she could not help herself. Each word made her feel smaller and more uncertain about whether she belonged here. The competition director approached the microphone on the small stage. "Ladies and gentlemen, we will begin the performances in 15 minutes. Contestants, please. Prepare yourselves and remember that you will perform in numerical order." Maya was contestant number 17, which meant she would be one of the last to play. This gave her more time to get ready, but it also meant she would have to sit and listen to all the other performances first. Maya wondered if this would make her more nervous or help her feel more prepared. Dr. Petrov took his place at the judges' table along with two other music professors. He arranged his papers neatly and put on a pair of reading glasses. His face looked stern and serious, like he was preparing to find fault with every performance. "Contestant number 1, please take the stage," the director announced. A 12-year-old boy named Timothy walked confidently to the piano. He was dressed in a perfect black suit with a bow tie. His hair was combed smoothly and his shoes were polished to a shine. Timothy looked like he had stepped out of a classical music magazine. Timothy sat at the piano bench and adjusted his position carefully. He placed his hands on the keys and began playing a piece by Johann Sebastian Bach. The music was technically perfect. Every note was clear and precise. Timothy's fingers moved quickly across the keys without making a single mistake. Maya listened carefully to the performance. She had to admit that Timothy was very skilled. His technique was flawless and his timing was excellent. But something was missing from his playing. The music sounded cold and mechanical, like it was coming from a computer instead of a human being. When Timothy finished, the audience clapped politely. Dr. Petrov made notes on his paper without showing any emotion on his face. "Very good technical execution," Dr. Petrov announced. "Your fingerwork is precise and your tempo is steady. However, I would like to see more emotional interpretation in your phrasing." Timothy nodded nervously and walked off the stage. Maya could tell he was disappointed by the mixed review. Contestant number 2 was a 14-year-old girl named Alexandra. She wore a fancy pink dress covered in sparkles, and her blonde hair was arranged in perfect curls. Alexandra's performance was a piece by Frédéric Chopin, one of Maya's favorite composers. Like Timothy, Alexandra played all the notes correctly. Her technique was smooth and her posture was elegant. But again, Maya felt like something important was missing. The music was pretty, but not moving. It did not touch her heart or make her feel anything special. Dr. Petrov's review was similar to his first critique. Technically adequate, but lacking in passion and depth, Chopin requires more emotional vulnerability in the interpretation. One by one, the young contestants performed their pieces. Maya listened to performances of Mozart, Beethoven, Liszt, and other great composers. Every single performance was technically correct. These young musicians had obviously practiced for many hours and studied with expensive teachers. But as Maya listened, she began to notice a pattern. All of the contestants were playing it safe. They were so afraid of making mistakes that they were not taking any risks with their interpretation. Their performances were perfect but boring. Maya heard fear in every performance. The contestants were terrified of hitting wrong notes or playing too fast or too slow. They were so focused on avoiding mistakes that they forgot to make the music come alive. Dr. Petrov's reviews became more and more harsh as the competition continued. Lifeless, he said about one performance. Mechanical, he said about another. No artistic vision whatsoever, he declared after a particularly safe rendition of a Beethoven sonata. Maya began to understand something important. Dr. Petrov was not just looking for technical perfection. He wanted to hear music that moved people's hearts and souls. He wanted performances that took risks and showed the pianist's personality. This realization both encouraged and frightened Maya. She knew that her playing style was very different from what she had heard so far. Maya always played with deep emotion and personal interpretation. She was not afraid to take risks or show vulnerability in her music. But Dr. Petrov's earlier comments about needing to see the music still echoed in her mind. What if he was right? What if emotional playing was not enough without the visual connection he had talked about? Contestant number 8 was a 15-year-old girl named Jennifer. She was the one whose mother had bragged about the expensive private teachers. Jennifer wore a designer dress that probably cost more than Maya's family spent on groceries in a month. Jennifer's performance was the most technically impressive so far. She played a difficult piece by Franz Liszt with incredible speed and accuracy. Her fingers flew across the keys like lightning. The audience gasped at some of the more challenging passages. When Jennifer finished, the applause was much louder than it had been for the previous contestants. Maya could tell that people were genuinely impressed by the girl's skill. Now that was a proper display of technique, Dr. Petrov announced with approval in his voice. Miss Jennifer has clearly received excellent training. Her fingerwork is exceptional and her understanding of the composer's intentions is evident. Maya felt her confidence drop even further. Jennifer's performance had been truly impressive. How could Maya compete with that level of technical training? The performances continued through the afternoon. Maya listened to contestant after contestant play beautiful, difficult pieces with varying degrees of success. Some were better than others, but all of them had clearly spent years studying with professional teachers. As the competition went on, Maya began to feel more and more out of place. These other young musicians came from wealthy families who could afford the best music education money could buy. They had studied in Europe, taken lessons with famous teachers, and performed in prestigious concert halls. Maya thought about her own musical education. She had learned to play on an old, out-of-tune piano in her family's small apartment. Her teacher was Mrs. Rodriguez, a kind elderly woman who had never charged Maya's family a penny for lessons. Maya had never traveled to study music or attended fancy music camps. But Maya also remembered something Mrs. Rodriguez had told her many times. Music is not about how much money you spend or how fancy your teachers are, the old woman had said. Music is about sharing your heart with the world. The greatest musicians are the ones who can make people feel something deep inside. Maya tried to hold on to these words as she listened to more technically perfect but emotionally empty performances. She reminded herself that she had something these other contestants did not have. She had learned to express her deepest feelings through music because it was the only way she could share her inner world with others. Contestant number 15 was a 13-year-old boy named Marcus. Maya remembered him as the friendly young man who had spoken to her earlier. Marcus chose to play a piece by Sergei Rachmaninoff, the same composer Maya had selected for her performance. Marcus played beautifully, with more emotion than most of the previous contestants. Maya could hear that he truly understood the sadness and hope in Rachmaninoff's music. His performance was not just technically correct, it had heart and soul. When Marcus finished, the audience applauded enthusiastically. Even Dr. Petrov seemed impressed. Much better, the famous pianist said with approval. This young man understands that music must speak to the emotions, not just the intellect. However, there is still room for improvement in the dynamic contrasts and tempo flexibility. Maya felt happy for Marcus, but also worried. If Dr. Petrov thought Marcus needed improvement, what would he say about her playing? Contestant number 16 was the last performance before Maya's turn. It was a 16-year-old girl named Sarah who played Beethoven's famous Moonlight Sonata. The piece was technically demanding, but not as difficult as some of the others that had been performed. Sarah's rendition was competent, but uninspiring. She played all the notes correctly and maintained good posture throughout the performance. But the music felt empty and hollow, like she was just going through the motions. When Sarah finished, Dr. Petrov's review was particularly harsh. "This is exactly what I mean about the importance of visual connection and proper presentation," he announced loudly. "Classical music requires more than just pressing the right keys in the right order. It demands a complete understanding of the artistic vision." Maya knew that this comment was directed at her, even though Dr. Petrov was supposedly reviewing Sarah's performance. Maya walked slowly across the stage with Luna by her side. Each step felt heavy and important. The concert hall was completely silent except for the soft sound of her shoes on the polished wood floor. She could feel hundreds of people watching her, waiting to see what would happen next. When Maya reached the beautiful grand piano, she stopped and placed her hand gently on its smooth surface. The instrument was magnificent, much larger and more powerful than the old piano she practiced on at home. She could feel the quality of the wood and the precision of the craftsmanship under her fingertips. Luna guided Maya to the piano bench and then lay down quietly beside the instrument. The golden retriever had done this many times before during Maya's performances. Luna knew to stay perfectly still and silent while Maya played. Maya sat down on the bench and adjusted her position carefully. She had learned over the years exactly how to sit for the best sound and comfort. Her feet found the pedals beneath the piano, and she tested them gently to make sure she understood how they responded. The audience watched every movement with intense curiosity. Some people had never seen a blind person perform classical music before. They wondered how Maya would manage without being able to see the keys or read sheet music. Dr. Petrov sat at the judges' table with his arms crossed over his chest. His face showed clear skepticism and impatience. He had already made up his mind that Maya did not belong here, and he was waiting for her performance to prove his point. Maya placed her hands lightly on the piano keys without pressing them down. She closed her eyes, even though it made no difference to her world of permanent darkness. This was her ritual before every performance. She took a moment to connect with the music in her heart and prepare her mind for the journey ahead. "What piece will you be performing today?" Dr. Petrov asked in his cold, stern voice. Maya lifted her head toward the sound of his voice. Her face was calm and peaceful, showing no sign of the nervousness she felt inside. "I will be playing Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2, Third Movement," Maya announced clearly. A wave of surprised whispers swept through the audience. Several people gasped quietly. Even some of the other contestants looked shocked by Maya's choice. Rachmaninoff's Second Piano Concerto was one of the most difficult and demanding pieces in all of classical music. It required incredible technical skill, physical strength, and deep emotional understanding. Many professional pianists spent years learning to play it properly. For a 16-year-old to attempt it was either very brave or very foolish. Dr. Petrov raised his eyebrows in surprise and annoyance. "That is quite an ambitious selection," he said with sarcasm in his voice. "Are you certain you want to attempt such a challenging piece? Perhaps something simpler would be more appropriate for your situation." Maya's jaw tightened slightly at the word situation, but she kept her voice steady and polite. "I am certain, sir. This piece speaks to me, and I believe I can do it justice." Dr. Petrov shook his head and made a note on his paper. "Very well. Proceed." Maya took a deep breath and felt the familiar calm that always came over her before performing. All the cruel comments and doubts from earlier in the day began to fade away. There was only Maya the piano, and the music that lived in her soul. She placed her fingers on the keys and began to play. From the very first note, something magical happened in the concert hall. Maya's interpretation was unlike anything the IDA audience had heard that day. Where the other contestants had played with technical precision but little emotion, Maya's music was filled with raw feeling and artistic vision. The opening melody flowed from the piano like liquid gold. Maya's touch was both powerful and delicate, depending on what the music required. She did not just play the notes that Rachmaninoff had written. She brought them to life with her own unique interpretation. Maya's body moved naturally with the music. She swayed gently as the melody rose and fell. Her face reflected every emotion in the composition. When the music was sad, tears formed in her closed eyes. When it was triumphant, she smiled with pure joy. The audience was mesmerized. People who had been shifting restlessly in their seats during previous performances now sat perfectly still, hanging on every note. Even the other contestants stopped their nervous whispering and listened in amazement. Maya played the complex passages with stunning accuracy, but more importantly, she played them with deep understanding. Every phrase told a story, every dynamic. Change had meaning. She was not just performing a difficult piece of music. She was sharing her heart and soul with everyone in the room. As the music progressed, Maya's interpretation became even more powerful. She took risks that the other contestants had been afraid to take. She varied the tempo in ways that revealed new layers of meaning in the composition. She used the piano's full range of dynamics, from whisper-quiet passages to thunderous climaxes. Dr. Petrov's expression began to change as he listened. The skeptical frown on his face slowly transformed into something like wonder. He leaned forward in his chair, paying closer attention to every note. His pen remained motionless on his paper. As he forgot to take notes, Maya reached the most technically challenging section of the piece. Her fingers flew across the keys with incredible speed and precision. But even in these difficult passages, she never lost the emotional thread of the music. Every note served the larger artistic purpose of the composition. The audience held their breath during the most demanding parts. Some people had heard professional pianists struggle with these same passages, but Maya navigated them with seeming ease, her face calm and focused. Maya's left hand played the deep, resonant bass notes that provided the foundation for the melody. Her right hand danced across the higher keys, creating sparkling runs and delicate flourishes. Both hands worked together in perfect coordination, creating a rich tapestry of sound. As Maya played, she forgot about everything except the music. She forgot about Dr. Petrov's cruel comments. She forgot about the expensive dresses and famous teachers of her competitors. She forgot about being different or disadvantaged. There was only the pure joy of making music, the piece built toward its emotional climax. Maya's playing became more intense and passionate. She used the full power of the concert grand piano, filling the hall with glorious sound. But even at the loudest moments, every note was clear and purposeful. Maya's interpretation revealed depths in Rachmaninoff's composition that many listeners had never noticed before. She brought out inner voices in the harmony that most pianists overlooked. She found connections between different sections of the piece that created a unified, artistic statement. As the music approached its conclusion, Maya's playing became both more tender and more powerful. She shaped each phrase with exquisite care, building toward the final resolution. The last few measures were played with such beauty and conviction that several audience members began to cry. Maya's hands moved to the final chord of the piece. She held it for exactly the right amount of time, letting the beautiful harmony ring through the concert hall. Then she lifted her hands from the keys and sat quietly, her head slightly bowed. For several long seconds, the hall remained completely silent. No one moved or breathed. The spell of Maya's performance held everyone in its grip. Then, slowly, One person began to clap. Then another joined in. Within moments, the entire audience was on their feet, applauding with tremendous enthusiasm. The ovation was unlike anything that had been heard in the hall that day. Maya sat at the piano bench, overwhelmed by the response. She had poured everything she had into this performance, and the audience had felt every emotion she had shared. Tears of joy and relief streamed down her face. The standing ovation continued for several minutes. People were not just clapping politely, they were cheering and calling out words of praise. Even some of the other contestants were applauding, recognizing that they had witnessed something truly special. Maya finally stood up from the piano bench. Luna immediately appeared at her side, ready to guide her off the stage. Maya bowed gracefully. Toward the audience, her face glowing with happiness and accomplishment. But before Maya could leave the stage, Dr. Petrov's voice cut through the applause. His words would change everything that came next. "Wait," he called out in a voice that sounded completely different from the cold, harsh tone he had used earlier. The applause died down as people turned to look at the famous pianist. Dr. Petrov was standing at the judges' table, his face transformed by what he had just heard. Gone was the arrogant dismissiveness that had characterized his earlier behavior. In its place was something that looked like humility and genuine awe. Maya stood frozen on the stage, unsure of what was coming next. After everything that had happened, that day she was prepared for anything. But what Dr. Petrov said next would surprise everyone in the concert hall, including Maya herself. Maya stood motionless on the stage, her heart pounding as she waited to hear what Dr. Petrov would say. Luna pressed close to her side, sensing the tension in the moment. The entire concert hall held its breath, waiting for the famous pianist's words. Dr. Petrov slowly rose from his chair at the judges' table. His movements were deliberate and careful, as if he was struggling with something deep inside himself. When he spoke, his voice was completely different from the cold, harsh tone he had used earlier in the day. In 40 years of professional music, Dr. Petrov began, his Russian accent thick with emotion. I have performed in the greatest concert halls around the world. I have played with the most prestigious orchestras and studied with masters who learned directly from the great composers themselves. The audience listened in complete silence. Maya tilted her head toward his voice, trying to understand where this speech was leading. In all those years, Dr. Petrov continued, his voice beginning to tremble slightly, I have never heard Rachmaninoff played with such profound understanding and artistic vision. Gasps echoed throughout the hall. People looked at each other in amazement. Dr. Petrov was known for his harsh criticism and impossibly high standards. For him to give such praise was almost unheard of. Maya felt dizzy with surprise. After the cruel things Dr. Petrov had said to her earlier, she had expected another attack on her abilities. Instead, he seemed to be praising her performance in the strongest possible terms. Dr. Petrov walked slowly toward the stage, each step measured and thoughtful. His earlier arrogance was completely gone, replaced by something that looked like genuine humility. Miss Chen, he said as he approached the piano, you have taught an old fool a very important lesson about the true nature of music. Maya's mother, Sarah, watched from the audience with tears streaming down her face. She had suffered through hours of watching her daughter be humiliated and dismissed. Now she was witnessing something she had never dared to hope for. Dr. Petrov reached the edge of the stage and looked up at Maya with respect in his eyes. I spoke to you earlier about the importance of visual connection in music. I said that great pianists must be able to see the beauty that inspired the compositions they play. Maya nodded, remembering his harsh words about sunsets and falling leaves and children's smiles. I was wrong, Dr. Petrov said simply. Completely and utterly wrong. The admission sent another wave of surprised whispers through the audience. Dr. Petrov was famous for never admitting mistakes or showing weakness of any kind. You have shown me that music is not about what we see with our eyes, Dr. Petrov continued. It is about what we understand with our hearts and souls. You play, not just with your fingers, but with your entire being. You have found the emotional truth that lives at the center of Rachmaninoff's composition. Maya felt overwhelmed by his words. After a lifetime of being told what she could not do because of her blindness, hearing such praise from one of the world's most respected musicians was almost too much to believe. Dr. Petrov climbed the steps to the stage, moving slowly and deliberately. When he reached Maya, he stopped just a few feet away from her. Your interpretation revealed layers of meaning in that concerto that I had never noticed before, he said, with genuine admiration in his voice. You brought out inner voices and connections that most professional pianists miss completely. You did not just play the notes that Rachmaninoff wrote. You captured the spirit of what he was trying to express. Maya struggled to find words to respond. Thank you, sir. That means more to me than you can know. Dr. Petrov shook his head firmly. No, Miss Chen. It is I who should be thanking you. You have reminded me why I fell in love with music in the first place, before fame and success and competition made me forget the pure joy of artistic expression. The famous pianist paused and looked out at the audience before continuing. I have spent so many years focusing on technical perfection and visual presentation that I lost sight of what really matters. Music is a language of the heart, not a performance for the eyes. Maya felt tears of joy running down her cheeks. After all the doubt and humiliation of the day, this moment felt like a miracle. Miss Chen, Dr. Petrov said, his voice becoming stronger and more determined. I owe you a sincere and public apology for my behavior earlier today. My comments were cruel, ignorant, and completely unfounded. I allowed my prejudices and narrow thinking to blind me to your extraordinary talent. The audience burst into spontaneous applause at his words. Many people were deeply moved by seeing the famous pianist show such humility and grace. Dr. Petrov raised his hand to quiet the applause so he could continue speaking. I have built my reputation on being a harsh critic and demanding teacher. I thought that made me a better musician. But you have shown me that the greatest artistry comes from openness, vulnerability, and emotional truth. Maya wiped the tears from her face and tried to compose herself. She wanted to respond with dignity and grace, even though her emotions were overwhelming her. Dr. Petrov, Maya said softly, I understand that you were trying to maintain high standards for this competition. I do not hold any anger toward you for your earlier comments. Dr. Petrov looked amazed by her generous response. You are as gracious as you are talented, Miss Chen. I do not deserve such kindness after the way I treated you. Maya smiled gently. Music belongs to everyone, sir. It is one of the few languages that can cross all barriers, including the ones we sometimes create for ourselves. Dr. Petrov was quiet for a long moment, clearly moved by Maya's wisdom and maturity. When he spoke again, his voice was filled with respect and admiration. Miss Chen, would you do me the honor of allowing me to accompany you in a duet? I believe I have much to learn from your approach to music, and I would be grateful for the opportunity to play beside such an accomplished artist. The request sent shockwaves through the audience. Dr. Petrov never asked to play with amateur musicians, especially not young competition contestants. For him to make such a request was unprecedented. Maya's face lit up with genuine joy. I would be honored to play with you, Dr. Petrov. The two pianists sat down together at the large concert grand piano. Dr. Petrov took the lower section of the keyboard while Maya positioned herself at the higher keys. They chose a piece by Mozart that could be arranged for 4 hands on one piano. As they began to play together, something beautiful happened. Dr. Petrov's technically perfect but emotionally cold style began to warm under Maya's influence. He started to play with more feeling and expression. following Maya's lead in interpreting the music with heart instead of just precision. Maya, in turn, benefited from Dr. Petrov's incredible technical skill and deep knowledge of classical music structure. Together, they created a performance that was greater than either could have achieved alone. The audience watched in amazement as the unlikely partnership unfolded before them. The famous established master and the young blind student played as equals, each learning from the other. When they finished the duet, the applause was thunderous. People were on their feet, cheering not just for the beautiful music, but for the transformation they had witnessed in both pianists. Dr. Petrov turned to Maya with genuine warmth in his eyes. "Thank you for reminding me what music is really about, Miss Chen. You have given me a gift more valuable than any award or recognition." The competition judges had no difficulty making their decision. Maya was declared the winner unanimously, earning a full scholarship to study at any music school she chose. But more importantly, Maya's performance had touched hearts and changed minds throughout the concert hall. A video of her playing, recorded by someone in the audience, would later be shared millions of times online, inspiring people around the world. Dr. Petrov became Maya's mentor and strongest advocate. He completely changed his teaching philosophy, focusing on emotional truth and artistic expression rather than just technical perfection. He often told other musicians about the young blind pianist who had taught him to see music clearly for the first time. Maya went on to study at Juilliard, where she excelled not just as a performer but as a composer and teacher. She never forgot the lessons she learned that day about perseverance, dignity, and the power of music to transform hearts and minds. Years later, when Maya had become an internationally acclaimed concert pianist, she would often tell young musicians about the day she learned that the greatest victories are not about proving others wrong. They are about proving that human potential knows no boundaries, and that true artistry comes from the courage to share your authentic self with the world. The story of Maya and Dr. Petrov spread far beyond the classical music world. It became a reminder that prejudice and narrow thinking can be overcome through talent, determination, and grace. Most importantly, it showed that music truly is a universal language that can unite people across all differences and create understanding where there was once only ignorance. Maya's journey from humiliation to triumph proved that the most beautiful music comes not from what we see with our eyes, but from what we feel with our hearts. Her story inspired countless other young people with disabilities to pursue their dreams, knowing that with enough dedication and courage, any barrier can be overcome. In the end,